Imagine, uh, imagine you lose your job tomorrow.
Right.
You wake up, the severance is just gone, and the global economy is in an absolute free fall.
A total nightmare scenario.
Exactly. The stock market is crashing. Companies in your specific industry are declaring bankruptcy left and right. And, your bank account is slowly but surely draining towards zero.
Yeah, that primal fear really kicks
It
in.
does. And human logic, or survival instinct, or whatever you want to call it, it basically dictates one clear path forward, right?
Yeah.
You cling to your unemployment check like it's a life raft.
Oh, absolutely. You cut all your expenses.
Right, you hunker down, and you absolutely do not take any wild, life-altering financial risks.
Because it's the most primal defensive posture we have in modern capitalism. When the environment becomes hostile, our risk tolerance just drops to near zero.
But I want to take you and everyone listening to France in the year 2002.
Okay, setting the scene.
Yeah, the global dot-com bubble has just violently burst. Trillions of dollars in imaginary paper wealth have evaporated globally, and the French economy is plunging into a severely dark recession.
Right. Unemployment is just surging.
It is. The news is nothing but economic doom. By every metric of, behavioral economics, people should be hiding under their beds financially.
They really should be.
But instead, this incredibly bizarre, entirely counterintuitive phenomenon occurs. If you look at the macroeconomic data for that exact moment, the rate of newly registered businesses doesn't drop.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't even stay flat. It shoots straight up. The line on the graph for new startups crosses in the exact opposite direction of the plunging GDP.
Which is, that is the absolute definition of an anomaly.
It really is.
On the surface, it looks like mass irrationality, like this spontaneous nationwide delusion, where thousands of citizens simultaneously decided, that the middle of a brutal recession was the perfect time to bet the farm and start a company.
Right. It makes absolutely no sense until you look at the hidden architecture beneath the economy. Which brings us to the core mission for today's deep dive.
And it is a fascinating one.
It totally is. We're unpacking a meticulously researched, just groundbreaking paper from a team of academic heavyweights. We're talking researchers from HEC Paris, MIT, and UC Berkeley.
A serious lineup.
Yeah, they managed to gain access to highly confidential French microdata to investigate this exact anomaly. And what they found, it answers a question that really cuts to the very heart of human nature.
A question that economists have quite literally fought over for decades.
Right. So here's the ultimate anti-common sense question we're exploring today. If a government gives unemployed people a guaranteed, risk-free financial safety net to try their hand at entrepreneurship.
Right, a total downside guarantee.
Exactly. Does society breed a generation of lazy leeches? Or does it unleash a hidden army of brilliant founders?
It's the ultimate test of welfare versus motivation, but played out in the real world at a massive scale with billions of euros on the line.
It really is. So welcome to the deep dive. For you listening right now, whether you're an entrepreneur, an armchair economist, or just someone wondering why you haven't started that passion project yet, we are going to dismantle everything you think you know about risk.
Everything.
Everything. Safety nets and what actually drives human innovation. We're going to look at cold, hard data that proves protecting people from failure might actually be the ultimate capitalist superpower.
Oh.
So let's unpack this.
Let's do it, because to really grasp the magnitude of what happened in 2002, we have to understand the environment of Europe just before this all kicked off.
Right, the historical context.
Exactly. There is this deeply ingrained cultural stereotype about the European, and specifically, the French attitude toward business.
Oh man, the stereotype is legendary. There's that quote famously attributed to U.S. President George W. Bush, and whether he actually said it or not, it perfectly captures the American view of Europe at the time.
Oh, I know the exact quote you're talking about.
Yeah, he supposedly mocked the French by saying, the problem with the French is that they don't even have a word for entrepreneur.
The irony being, of course, that entrepreneur is literally a French word.
Right, the ultimate linguistic irony. But, the subtext of that joke was real. Yeah. He was mocking an entire nation for supposedly lacking the guts, the drive, the raw capitalist spirit to build things.
Yeah, the assumption was they just didn't have the stomach for it.
Exactly. And yet this is the very nation that, right under the world's nose, quietly figured out how to mass-produce entrepreneurs on a scale nobody had seen before.
Yeah.
But let's be fair to the skeptics for a second.
Okay, let's hear it.
If you look at the historical reality of France pre-2001, the system kind of validated that stereotype, didn't it?
It absolutely did. The barrier to entry for starting a business was just paralyzing.
How bad was it?
Well, think about the United States. There's a culture of failing forward, right? If you start a business and it goes under, you file Chapter 11, you dust yourself off, and you try again.
It's almost a badge of honor in Silicon Valley.
Exactly. But in Europe, pre-2001, bankruptcy wasn't just a legal mechanism. It was a permanent, life-ruining black mark. If you failed, you were financially decimated. The systemic friction was enormous, and there was zero margin for error.
So it wasn't that the French lacked the spirit. It was that they possessed basic arithmetic skills and a completely rational fear of absolute ruin.
Precisely. And the most dangerous trap of all was the unemployment system itself. Before 2001, the rules were just draconian.
Okay, walk me through that.
So imagine you lose your job. You were collecting unemployment benefits, keeping your head above water. You have an idea for a business, right? Maybe a consulting firm or a specialized bakery.
Okay, I've got my idea. I'm ready to go.
The minute you walk into a government office and register that business, you instantly lose all your accumulated unemployment benefits. Day one.
Oh, wow. I'm trying to put myself in that position. I'm already down on my luck. I want to try to build something that might eventually, hire other people. And the government's response is to pull the rug completely out from under me.
Yep, the safety net is gone the second you try.
That isn't just a lack of support. That is an active penalty for trying.
It forced a devastating stalemate. You basically had two choices. You either sat on your couch, did nothing, and safely collected your check.
Right.
Or you leaped into the abyss with no parachute, knowing that if your business didn't generate immediate cash flow in month one, you couldn't pay your rent.
And then comes the catalyst. July 2001. The French government rolls out a reform called PARE. And by early 2002, as the dot-com crash is really starting to bite, they are heavily advertising this new policy to the public.
And PRE fundamentally shattered that stalemate. The government changed the rules of the game.
What did they do?
They announced that if an unemployed person started a business, they would no longer be cast out into the cold. The state would offer a downside safety net.
Meaning what exactly?
They essentially said, go build your company, and if it makes nothing, you can keep your unemployment check for up to 3 years.
Okay, I have to stop you there because my alarm bells are ringing so loud right now.
I thought they might.
Yeah, I am looking at this through the lens of human nature, and I'm having a really hard time buying this as a genius move.
Why is that?
Well, if you tell a nation of millions, hey, go start a business, and if you completely fail to make a dime, we'll just keep paying your rent and buying your groceries. Aren't you just begging for a massive grift?
It sounds like a recipe for disaster, doesn't it?
It does. If a government guarantees my rent, my instinct is that people are going to do the bare minimum. They're going to print out a business card, call themselves a CEO, and spend 3 years playing video games.
Your skepticism is not only valid, it was the exact center of a vicious debate among economists at the time. When PRA was announced, the academic world literally fractured into two warring camps trying to predict the outcome.
I imagine the first camp was completely horrified by the moral hazard.
They were. We call this the selection view. And their argument aligns perfectly with your instinct. Removing risk floods the market with low-skill opportunists.
Right, the slackers.
Yeah, if failure has no teeth, you invite people who have no business being entrepreneurs to just clog up the system. The selection view predicts that the sheer volume of startups might go up, but the average quality of those startups will absolutely plummet.
The safety net just becomes a hammock.
Exactly, a hammock for lazy people. But the second camp championed what we call the experimentation view. And this theory is a lot more nuanced.
Okay, what's their take?
It argues that high catastrophic risk actually suppresses a very specific type of person, someone who is highly talented but deeply risk averse.
Because talent and risk tolerance are not the same genetic trait.
That is the crucial distinction. The experimentation view assumes that the people sitting on the sidelines aren't lazy. They're just mathematically cautious.
Right.
Removing the catastrophic risk doesn't primarily invite the scammers. It unlocks the hidden genius of people who just couldn't afford to take a wild gamble.
I really love that distinction. I mean, I might be a brilliant software engineer with an idea that could revolutionize an industry, but if I have 2 kids, a mortgage, and an aging parent to care for, I am not going to risk starvation to prove my genius.
Right, because you are a responsible adult.
Exactly.
So the rollout of PRE in 2001 was the ultimate large-scale, real-world test. We were finally going to see which theory was right. The selection view, predicting a swamp of laziness, or the experimentation view, predicting a renaissance of hidden talent.
And the secret to why this actually worked, and spoiler alert for the listener, it worked spectacularly, lies in the incredibly specific, almost covert mechanics of the PRE policy.
It really does.
Because when you read the fine print, this supposedly generous government handout was practically useless to anyone trying to pull a scam and totally unappealing to anyone who planned on getting rich quickly.
The brilliance of the policy is in its precision. It wasn't just a blank check handed out to anyone with a CEO mug. It operated on a hidden mechanism that we can call the one-to-one rule.
Okay, walk me through the exact math of this, because I think this is where the genius really lies. Let's invent a hypothetical French worker. Let's call him Pierre.
All right, Pierre.
Pierre gets laid off from his accounting firm in late 2001.
Okay, Pierre is unemployed. Let's say his standard unemployment check, based on his past salary, is 1,000 euros a month.
Got it.
Under the new PRE rules, Pierre decides to start a freelance accounting business. In month 1, he has no clients. The business earns absolutely zero.
Which is typical for month 1.
Totally. So the government steps in and gives him his full 1,000 euros. His downside is protected. He can buy groceries.
So far, the Selection View camp is screaming, see, he's doing nothing and getting paid.
But here is the mechanism kicking in. In month 2, Pierre hustles and lands a small client. His business earns 200 euros.
Okay, progress.
He reports this to the tax authority. Because of the one-to-one rule, the government deducts exactly 200 euros from his unemployment check.
Wait, so his check drops to 800, plus the 200 he earned from the business, he still only takes home 1,000 euros total.
Precisely. For every single euro his business earns, he loses a euro of benefits. His total income remains completely flat at 1,000 euros until his business revenue finally surpasses that threshold.
That is fascinating. It's a perfectly sliding scale. But what if Pierre's business goes viral? What if, in month 3, he makes 5,000 euros? Does the government give him a bonus for successfully getting off welfare?
No, they give him absolutely nothing. Once he crosses the 1,000 euro threshold, the subsidy drops to zero.
No.
There are no upside subsidies. The government does not reward success. They only insure against catastrophic failure.
I have an analogy for this, and it really clarifies why this completely defeats the welfare hammock argument.
Let's hear it.
It's exactly like buying fire insurance for your house.
Yeah.
If you buy a policy, you don't sit around hoping your house burns down so you can cash the check and make a profit. That's arson.
Right, that's a crime.
You buy the insurance so you aren't living on the street if the worst possible thing happens. Having fire insurance doesn't incentivize you to light a match in your living room. It just lets you sleep peacefully at night.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. PRE is entrepreneurial fire insurance. And when you apply that one-to-one deduction mechanism to human psychology, it acts as a ruthless, highly efficient filter.
Because it filters out the extremes on both ends. Let's think about the scammer first.
Okay.
If I'm a lazy opportunist and I know I'm not actually going to work, my business is going to make zero. Under this rule, I get 1,000 euros. But if I just sit on the couch and don't start a fake business, I also get 1,000 euros.
Exactly.
Why would I go through the immense bureaucratic hassle of incorporating a company, filing monthly tax reports, and dealing with auditors just to get the exact same money I'd get for watching TV?
You wouldn't. The policy offers zero premium for fraud. It naturally repels the scammers because the administrative friction just isn't worth a payout that doesn't increase.
And on the other extreme, what about the hyper-confident, risk-loving founder? Like the 22-year-old who is convinced their app is going to be worth millions in 3 months.
To that person, this policy is completely invisible. If you are confident you are going to immediately blow past that 1,000 euro threshold, the downside protection is basically irrelevant to you. It doesn't change your behavior at all.
Which means this policy was a laser-guided missile aimed at one very specific demographic.
It caught the middle ground. It captured the cautious, competent professional, the person who has the skills to build a solid company, but who needs a 12 to 18-month runway to find clients without the threat of their children going hungry. It engineered psychological safety.
Okay, the policy design is elegant. I totally concede that.
Yeah.
But we have a massive analytical problem here, and this is where I really need to see how these researchers earn their paychecks.
Ah, the methodology.
Yeah, because it is 2002. The entire global economy is crashing. The researchers see a spike in startups. How do these top financial sleuths from MIT and HEC Paris actually prove that this specific policy caused the boom?
It's tricky.
Couldn't a skeptic just argue, hey, Nobody was hiring. The tech bubble burst. Millions of desperate people were just starting businesses because they had literally no other option to survive.
You've just identified the ultimate nightmare scenario for any data scientist. You have a massive macroeconomic shock, the dot-com recession happening at the exact same moment as your policy rollout.
Right.
How do you separate the signal of the PARE policy from the deafening noise of the recession?
Seriously, how do you do that? You can't put half the country in an alternate universe where the recession didn't happen.
To prove causation, and not just correlation, they had to borrow a concept from medical science. They needed a control group.
Like in a drug trial.
Right. In a trial, one group gets the real medicine and the other gets a sugar pill. The researchers needed to find a group of industries in the French economy that were suffering through the 2002 recession, but were totally uncontaminated by the new welfare policy.
But wait, the PRE policy was a national law. Anyone who was unemployed in France could legally use it. How can there possibly be an uncontaminated control group?
The secret lies in the types of businesses people were starting. The researchers realized that a downside safety net of, say, €1,000 a month is incredibly attractive if you are starting a business with very low fixed costs.
Oh, I see.
We call these sole proprietorships. Think of a freelance graphic designer, a local plumber, a management consultant, or a masonry worker.
Right. To start a consulting business, I need a laptop, an internet connection, and my brain. The barrier to entry is basically zero, so the unemployment check covers all my living expenses while I find clients.
Exactly. Now, compare that to a different sector. What if you want to start a heavy manufacturing plant, or a wholesale logistics company, or a television production studio?
You need millions in capital. You need factory equipment, warehouses, fleets of trucks.
Precisely. If you need €5 million to buy manufacturing equipment, an unemployment check of €1,000 a month does absolutely nothing to help you.
All right, it's a drop in the bucket.
The policy is legally available to you, but practically it offers zero leverage.
I see where this is going. The researchers didn't divide people. They divided the economy itself.
They split the entire French economy into quartiles based on how exposed they were to the PIE reform.
Genius.
They looked at historical data to see which industries traditionally had the highest rate of sole proprietorships. The highest exposure group, we'll call them the treatment group, were industries like construction, personal services, and business consulting.
Okay.
The lowest exposure group, the control group, were industries like heavy manufacturing, wholesale trade, and pharmaceuticals.
This is an incredibly elegant solution. Both the treatment group and the control group are living in the same country. Both are suffering through the exact same 2002 dot-com crash.
Exactly the same macro conditions.
Both are facing the exact same national despair and lack of corporate hiring, but only the treatment group realistically benefits from the PRE safety net.
This methodology is known in econometrics as difference in differences. It's a way of completely filtering out the noise. They measured the startup rate in the low-exposure industries before the reform and then after. Then they did the exact same thing for the high-exposure industries.
Let me see if I have this right. If the spike in startups was just caused by desperate people trying to survive the recession, we should see startups booming across the board in all industries equally, right?
That is exactly what you would expect if desperation were the sole driver. But the data revealed something entirely different. When they ran the difference in differences calculation, the macroeconomic noise of the recession just canceled itself out.
And what was left?
What remained was a staggering, highly isolated anomaly. In the industries highly exposed to the policy, new business registrations exploded by an excess of 14%.
14%. In the middle of a brutal recession.
Yes.
That is a seismic shift in macroeconomic terms.
It was a massive wave of new entrants. And the crucial detail is that this 14% explosion was completely missing from the low-exposure control group.
So it wasn't desperation. It wasn't the recession. It was definitively, mathematically proven to be the downside safety net.
Beyond a shadow of a doubt, the policy was the catalyst.
Okay, so the researchers proved the boon is real and the policy caused it. But I am still holding on to a thread of skepticism here.
I wouldn't expect anything less.
We need to look much closer at what these thousands of new companies actually look like on paper. Because as we dive into the middle of this national startup boom, the data reveals something that looks highly suspicious to a layman.
That's that.
Almost all of these new companies were launching with absolutely zero employees.
Yes, the vast majority were registered as solo operations, just the founder.
Which brings me right back to the zombie argument.
Yeah.
If a country suddenly experiences a 14% boom consisting almost entirely of zero-employee companies, my first thought is, this is just a guy in his pajamas.
The pajama phase, right?
Yeah, this is someone avoiding the horrible job market, pretending to be a freelancer to keep their benefits. Weren't these zero-employee wonders destined to just immediately collapse the second their 3 years of government runway ran out?
To answer that, the researchers first had to irrefutably link these zero-employee firms to the unemployed. They had to prove it wasn't just a general trend among wealthy people or existing business owners.
How do you prove who is starting them if the macro data just shows registrations?
They cross-referenced the business registrations with a completely separate pre-existing government subsidy called ACCRE.
Wait, what is ACCR?
ACCRE was an older, smaller subsidy program that was exclusively reserved for unemployed founders. It had nothing to do with the pay reform, but because only the unemployed could apply for it, it acted as a perfect tracking device.
Oh, like a radioactive dye injected into the bloodstream of the economy.
Exactly. The researchers pulled data from the SCIEN survey. SCIEN is this incredibly detailed, granular microsurvey run by the French Statistical Office. They survey a massive cohort of new entrepreneurs, asking them deeply personal financial and strategic questions.
Okay, so what did Sign tell them?
When the researchers looked at the SCIEN data for ACR applications, the graph was breathtaking. The applications skyrocketed from about 3,000 a month to nearly 6,000 a month, almost overnight.
100% increase. It literally doubled.
And the timing of that doubling perfectly mirrored the 14% national startup boom. The data proved that the unemployed weren't just participating in this economic shift, they were the engine driving the entire train.
Okay, so the unemployed are definitively the ones starting these solo shops. But let's shatter this zombie myth once and for all. Did they just immediately die?
That's the big question.
Yeah, when month 37 rolled around and the safety net vanished, did these companies evaporate?
This is where the data becomes deeply counterintuitive, and it's where the selection view economists really got a black eye. The researchers tracked the multi-year survival rates of these specific zero-employee firms. If the cynics were right, if these were just lazy opportunists in their pajamas, you would expect a massive, highly visible spike in failure rates compared to the pre-2001 era.
You'd expect them to fold the minute the government stopped paying the rent.
But they didn't. The survival rate of these new zero-employee firms didn't drop by a single percentage point compared to the brutal high-risk era before 2001.
Wait, really?
Really. They survived at the exact same rate as the hardened, risk-loving entrepreneurs from the past.
That is mind-blowing. The safety net didn't make the cohort softer or weaker. It just allowed a larger volume of equally resilient people to enter the arena.
And the story gets even more compelling. The pajama phase was entirely temporary. The data showed that a massive percentage of these solo founders used those first 2 years exactly as intended.
Meaning they actually built a business.
Yes. They survived the brutal early phase, established their footing, found a reliable client base, and then they started hiring staff and expanding.
The pajamas literally turned into real payrolls.
Exactly.
The safety net essentially acted as an incubator. It gave them the runway they needed to learn how to be a business owner without the threat of starvation hanging over their heads.
They needed time to learn the mechanics of capitalism without the penalty of ruin.
Okay, I see the survival data, but I want to push this further because survival isn't the same as excellence. I mean, I can survive by making bare minimum wages.
Sure.
When the floodgates opened and anyone could try starting a business without risking their life savings, did the overall talent pool turn into a swamp of mediocrity?
This is the ultimate quality check. The MIT and HEC researchers knew that survival rates weren't enough. They had to evaluate the human beings behind the businesses. They went back to that SCIEN microsurvey data, which is so valuable because it evaluates founders ex ante.
Ex ante meaning before the fact. Before we know if their business succeeds or fails, who are these people on paper? What is their pedigree?
Right. First, they looked at education. The hypothesis from the skeptics was that if you lower the barrier to entry, less educated, less qualified people will flood the market.
Did they? Did the influx of unemployed founders lower the average education level of French entrepreneurs?
The data said no. 46% of the new founders still had high school degrees or higher. That was absolutely identical to the pre-reform high-risk era.
So the intellectual capital didn't degrade. But what about their drive? You can be highly educated and still lack ambition.
Well, the SIN survey explicitly asked these founders, before they even open their doors, do you plan to hire employees within your first year?
Okay, so did ambition drop now that people had a comfortable safety net?
Again, the data was definitive. 23% of the new founders explicitly planned to hire employees within their first year.
Well, let me guess. That is also identical to the historical baseline.
Identical. The new founders were just as qualified, just as educated, and just as hungry to grow as the old founders. The safety net didn't dilute the talent pool at all. It simply expanded its borders to include people who previously couldn't afford the entry ticket.
Okay, the picture you're painting is overwhelmingly positive, but I'm going to throw a wrench into this.
Go for it.
What if this whole phenomenon was just a massive gray market corporate scam?
Ah, the fake contractor theory. This is a very common and very valid concern with any labor policy like this.
Exactly. Because if I am a greedy corporate executive in 2002 and my company is struggling, I might look at this PR reform and see a massive loophole.
How so?
What if I fire my accounting department, tell them to go collect their €1,000 a month from the government, and then immediately hire them back as independent contractors?
Oh, I see.
I save a fortune on payroll taxes, I don't have to provide benefits, and the French taxpayer foots the bill for my workforce. That's not innovation. That's just tax evasion dressed up as entrepreneurship. How do we know that isn't what drove the 14% boom?
The researchers absolutely anticipated this criticism. If the 14% boom was just corporate tax evasion, there would be a very obvious fingerprint in the data.
Where would they find that?
They looked at the SIN survey again, which specifically asks new founders to list who their primary clients are. If the fake contractor theory were true, you would see a massive, highly abnormal increase in new businesses, citing their former employer as their main or only client.
And what did the fingerprints show?
There was absolutely zero abnormal increase. The percentage of founders contracting for their old bosses remained completely flat. The data thoroughly and definitively shoots down the fake contractor theory. It wasn't a corporate scam.
Okay, well, what about a financial trick? Let's talk about the banks.
Sure.
If I have a guaranteed income of €1,000 a month from the government for 3 solid years, maybe I just took that government guarantee to my local bank, used it as collateral, and got a massive business loan I didn't actually deserve.
The bank loan illusion.
Right. Maybe the boom wasn't caused by psychological safety, but by a sudden flood of cheap credit.
Again, a totally reasonable hypothesis. If that were true, the financial architecture of these new startups would look drastically different from the past. They would be heavily leveraged with debt.
Did the researchers check that?
They did. They didn't just look at surveys. They pulled the actual tax files and examined the balance sheets of these new firms. The bank debt ratio, the amount of debt compared to their assets, stayed completely flat compared to the pre-reform era.
So they weren't loading up on cheap debt to fund these companies?
No. In fact, French banks generally refuse to lend against unemployment benefits anyway because they view it as precarious income. So the reform did not expand their credit capacity at all.
The verdict here is staggering. It wasn't corporate tax evasion. It wasn't a credit trick. It wasn't a horde of lazy zombies. It was pure, unadulterated psychological safety.
That's the only variable left.
The only thing missing from the European economy before 2001 was the permission to fail without losing everything.
And once the government granted that permission, the dam broke and the talent flooded in.
But wait, we need to pause here and talk about the dark side of this equation.
There's always a dark side.
Because economics is rarely a fairy tale where everybody wins and nobody gets hurt.
Yeah.
For every shiny new startup that thrives under this government safety net, someone else in the economy has to bleed. So in the shadows of this massive 14% entrepreneurial boom, who is being quietly slaughtered.
This is where the story shifts from an uplifting narrative about human potential to a brutal lesson in market dynamics. What's fascinating here is how the ecosystem fiercely rebalanced itself.
Rebalanced how?
Because you're right, there is no free lunch in macroeconomics. The researchers uncovered a phenomenon they termed the one-to-one crowding out effect.
The one-to-one crowding out effect. That sounds ominous. Walk me through the mechanics of this crowding out.
Think about it logically. You have thousands of new startups suddenly surviving, hiring people, and expanding their operations. But it's 2002. The national economy isn't growing.
Right, it's a recession.
Consumer spending isn't increasing. The total pie is exactly the same size.
So if the new guys are getting a slice of the pie, they have to be actively stealing it from someone else's plate.
Exactly. Where are their customers coming from? Where are their newly hired employees coming from? The data reveals a brutal one-to-one displacement for almost every single job that was created by one of these new, highly motivated startups. A job was destroyed somewhere else in the same sector of the economy.
Wow. So despite all this frantic activity and 14% more startups, the net job creation for the country was essentially zero.
On a macro level, the net gain in total employment within these sectors was incredibly small, almost statistically insignificant. It was a zero-sum game for labor.
This changes the entire complexion of the story. Who took the hit? Was it a classic David versus Goliath situation? Were these scrappy, unemployed founders taking down massive, faceless corporations?
Not at all. The data is incredibly specific about who died so the new firms could live. And it wasn't Goliath. It was more like David versus an older, tired David. The researchers found that giant corporations firms with more than 5 employees, which in the French local service economy counts as established, were totally immune to this disruption. Their employment levels didn't flinch.
So the big corporations didn't even notice who was bleeding.
The victims were the small incumbents. The older, established mom-and-pop shops operating in the exact same local markets.
Oh, man.
Think of the older plumbing company that had been operating the same way for 20 years, the established local consultant who hadn't updated their methods. The data shows that the employment growth for these older small firms plummeted by a significant 2.2%.
I want to pause and just think about how terrifying that is if you were a traditional small business owner in 2002. You've spent years building your little shop, surviving the high-risk era without a safety net.
Working incredibly hard.
Right. And suddenly, the government uses your taxpayer money to fund an army of highly motivated, agile new founders who enter your local market and ruthlessly outcompete you for your own customers. It almost feels like the government funded your executioners.
It is a harsh reality. If we connect this to the bigger picture, what you are describing is the visceral, ground-level reality of creative destruction.
Right. Schumpeter's theory.
Exactly. It's a term coined by the legendary economist Joseph Schumpeter. He argued that capitalism thrives by constantly, violently destroying the old, inefficient methods to make way for the new and innovative.
But usually when we talk about creative destruction, we use grand examples. We think of Amazon destroying local bookstores or Netflix destroying Blockbuster Video. Here, it's not a tech giant. It's just a hungry new plumber destroying a tired, older plumber down the street.
Exactly. The total number of plumbing jobs in the city didn't change, but the quality and the location of those jobs changed dramatically.
Because the new guys were better.
Yes. The new founders, driven by the fresh energy of their launch and the ticking clock of their 3-year runway, were simply better, more agile, and hungrier than the stagnant incumbents.
Which leads perfectly into the biggest conceptual hurdle of this entire paper.
What's that?
If the total number of jobs basically just shuffled from the left pocket to the right pocket, if we just destroyed a 4-person mom-and-pop shop to build a new 4-person startup, why do the economists who wrote this paper consider this reform an absolute, unequivocal triumph for the nation? Are we just rearranging deck chairs on a stagnant ship?
If you only measure an economy by the raw headcount of jobs, yes, it looks stagnant, but the economists consider it a triumph because of the productivity miracle.
The productivity miracle.
Right. It is never just about how many people are working. It is about what those people are actually producing during the hours they work.
Okay, lay the hard math on me. How do they measure this miracle?
The researchers didn't just count heads. They meticulously measured the financial value generated by those heads. They looked at a metric called value added per worker.
For the non-accountants listening, what exactly is value added per worker?
Simply put, it's the total revenue the business brings in minus the cost of the outside goods and services they had to buy to operate. It measures how much actual wealth the human labor inside the company created.
Okay, that makes sense.
And when they compared the new startups to the dying incumbent firms they were replacing, they found that the new startups generated an astonishing 7,000 euros more in value added per worker per year.
Let that sink in. 7,000 euros extra per person every single year in pure created value. Just because the worker was employed by the new, hungry founder instead of the old, stagnant founder.
That is a massive structural leap in economic efficiency.
And let me guess the cynical view here. The workers didn't see a dime of that extra 7,000 euros.
Wow.
It all went to pad the profit margins of the new founder.
Actually, no. The data shows the exact opposite. The workers benefited immensely from this disruption.
Really? How?
Because these new firms were so much more efficient and productive, they aggressively competed for talent and they paid their workers more. The tax files show the new firms paid, on average, 5,200 euros more in annual salaries than the old firms they were displacing.
Wow. So the old mom-and-pop shop wasn't just stagnant in their business methods. They were actively underpaying their staff because their underlying business was so inefficient.
Exactly. The old firms couldn't afford to pay more. This is the ultimate punchline of the whole deep dive, the real secret behind the PAR policy. It didn't magically create millions of new jobs out of thin air. Instead, it acted as a massive national resource optimization engine.
A national resource optimization engine. It's like upgrading the entire operating system of the French economy.
Yeah.
You didn't buy any new hardware. The number of workers is the same, but you arrange the code so much better that the whole machine runs faster.
That's a perfect analogy. The policy ruthlessly sucked labor and capital out of low-efficiency, low-paying, stagnant old companies, and it injected all of that talent into high-efficiency, high-paying, hungry new companies. It was a forced upgrade of the nation's productivity.
But let's look at the final ledger. Let's talk about the cold, hard cash the government actually spent to make this happen.
The final bill.
Because while all this beautiful economic optimization was happening, the French Treasury was actively writing checks. They were paying out unemployment benefits to all these founders, many of whom failed, and many of whom took a year or two to get off the ground.
True.
Did the government ultimately get fleeced, or did they pull off a masterstroke of public investment?
Let's do the accounting, because the researchers tallied the final bill. They estimate that the state gambled roughly 100 million euros of taxpayer money on this initiative.
Okay.
This was the raw cost of paying out those unemployment benefits to founders whose businesses eventually failed, or the subsidy paid while businesses were slowly growing.
100 million euros is a significant amount of public money to risk on a social experiment.
It is. But you have to look at the macroeconomic multiplier. Think about everything we just discussed. The massive efficiency upgrade across the sector.
The extra 7,000 euros in value created per worker.
Yes, the higher taxes generated by the 5,200 euro increase in average salaries. And crucially, the fact that because of the one-to-one deduction rule, successful founders actually got off the unemployment rolls much faster once their businesses took off.
Right. If they succeeded quickly, the government stopped paying them entirely, saving money compared to a worker who just sat on the couch for 3 years.
Exactly. When the researchers factored in all these variables and tallied up the total societal gain, the increased productivity, the higher wages, the saved UI benefits from the winners, the total economic return came out to 350 million euros.
So they spent 100 million euros in public funds, and they injected 350 million euros of new wealth into the economy. That is a 3.5x return on investment.
It's phenomenal.
Any venture capitalist on Wall Street would kill for a guaranteed 3.5x multiplier on a national scale.
It is an unbelievably successful policy outcome. It proves that funding the safety net wasn't a sunk cost. It was an active, high-yield investment.
Which brings me to the million-dollar question, and arguably the most important conceptual takeaway of this entire paper.
What's that?
If this is such a wildly profitable, amazing idea, if protecting downside risk unleashes this much genius, productivity, and wealth, why doesn't a private bank or a Wall Street firm just step in and sell startup failure insurance? If there's a 3.5x return to be had, why did it have to be the government that did it? Why didn't free market capitalism solve this problem on its own?
This is a beautiful economic puzzle, and it is the exact reason why government intervention is sometimes mathematically necessary. It comes down to two inescapable concepts in financial theory: information asymmetry and moral hazard.
Okay, let's break those down. Let's start with information asymmetry.
Imagine you walk into a private, for-profit bank in Paris. You sit down with a loan officer and say, I want to start a business. I want to buy an insurance policy from you so that if I fail to make money, you will pay my rent and buy my groceries for 3 years.
They've laughed me out of the building.
Because the bank faces immense information asymmetry. They don't know you. They don't know your deep-seated work ethic. They don't know if your business idea is legitimate or if you're secretly planning to take their insurance money, buy a PlayStation, and go on a 3-year mental vacation.
Right. And because I know I have the insurance, my intrinsic motivation to work 80-hour weeks might drop. That's the moral hazard.
Exactly. The private market literally cannot price that risk accurately. To cover the inevitable wave of scammers and lazy actors, Any premium the bank charges would have to be astronomically high.
It would be so expensive that the honest, hardworking entrepreneurs couldn't possibly afford to buy it.
The private market for this specific kind of human potential insurance simply cannot exist. It's a classic market failure.
But the government could do it. Why is the government immune to information asymmetry?
Because the government is in a completely unique, legally privileged position. Think about the infrastructure required for the one-to-one rule we discussed earlier.
Okay.
The state already runs the unemployment system. They already know exactly what your previous salary was. And most importantly, through the federal tax authority, they track your incoming business revenue with absolute legally mandated transparency.
A private bank cannot legally demand to see every single invoice I generate in real time. They can't audit my daily cash flow. But the tax man already does.
Exactly. The government already possesses the vast data infrastructure required to flawlessly execute the one-to-one deduction rule. They can instantly verify if you are making money or not, which eliminates the information asymmetry.
That makes total sense.
The government didn't distort the free market with the PAR reform. They did something much more profound. They completed a missing puzzle piece that private capitalism literally couldn't build on its own.
That is incredible. They used a public social welfare tool to turbocharge free market capitalist competition. They fixed a broken market.
It is the ultimate synthesis of public safety and private innovation. It proves they aren't enemies. They are symbiotic.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? As we wrap up this deep dive, let's summarize the incredible journey we just took. We started with a deeply cynical stereotype that people are inherently lazy and that if you give them a comfortable safety net, they will just lie in it and bleed the system dry.
But a brilliantly designed, data-backed policy change in France in 2002 proved the exact opposite.
It proved that when you strip away the catastrophic, life-ruining risk of failure, you don't get a society of couch potatoes.
No, not at all.
You get a society of builders, creators, and fiercely efficient competitors. You discover that the talent, the drive, and the ambition are already there in the minds of everyday people. It's just paralyzed by the rational fear of ruin.
And that realization has massive, urgent implications for how we structure our own society moving forward, especially right now.
Exactly. Because I want to leave you with a final provocative thought. Look around at the world today. We are living through a period of immense technological and economic upheaval.
AI is changing everything.
Yes, artificial intelligence is actively threatening to wipe out entire job sectors. White-collar work is being automated. Global economic anxiety is peaking. We are facing our own modern version of the 2002 dot-com crash, but potentially on a much larger structural scale.
The displacement of human labor over the next decade could be entirely unprecedented.
And right now, the mainstream solution seems to be panic. We are forcing everyone into endless coding boot camps, or telling them to just hustle harder in the gig economy, or warning them to cling to their corporate jobs no matter how miserable they are. But what if that is entirely the wrong approach?
What if the solution to a massive technological shift isn't more pressure and more fear, but radically more safety?
What if the secret to surviving the AI revolution and unlocking the next great wave of human innovation is simply providing an unbreakable safety net? What if the only thing standing between you and your greatest invention, your best business idea, or your most profound contribution to society isn't a lack of talent, but simply the fear of the fall?
It completely reframes the purpose of a social safety net. It's not a charity for the defeated. It is a high-yield investment in untapped human capital.
So I'll leave you with this question to ponder as you go about your day. How much genius is trapped inside you right now, simply because society hasn't given you the permission to fail?